You may not realize this, but today is a very important day for all the Fed watchers out there. You know who you are. It's the last day of the so-called Fed speak before policymakers go dark for the blackout period, can't talk. They don't say anything ahead of the July 31st FOMC meeting. Today, St. Louis Federal Reserve President James Bullard speaking at the Central Bank Research Association conference at New York's Columbia University. And Yahoo Finance's very own Brian Chung is there for all the Fed action. They certainly had to say a lot today, Brian, before they have to zip their lips. What caught your eye?
Yeah, well, St. Louis Fed President James Bullard, for those who actually don't know, is actually a voting member of this year's Federal Open Market Committee, so an important speaker, telling reporters today that actually he sees the case for a 25 basis point rate cut in the July 31st meeting. Keep in mind that he is perceived to be one of the more dovish members of this sitting Fed, so that might take some air out of the odds for a 50 basis point rate cut in the next meeting. But he told reporters that, you do have to ratify what they delivered in the June 19 meeting, which was the option or the possibility of a rate cut in this meeting. Said, you got to follow through. So interesting to see Bullard press on this. It's not particularly surprising given the fact that he already dissented on that June 19 meeting to actually hold rates steady, instead opting and arguing for a 25 basis point cut. That was the first time we had seen a dissent under Fed Chair Jerome Powell. And a little bit of Powell's intrigue for you. He actually said that he would be interested or would love to be Fed chair if he were nominated. Again, keep in mind that there's no rumors of that happening at the moment, but he said that he would love to be a member of the Fed, or he would love to serve as Fed chair, especially as we hear all this chatter about the president maybe being interested in trying to remove Jay Powell because of his disappointment with the amount of rate hikes that he's made during the year of 2018. So some interesting commentary there. Again, I do want to emphasize he has not been tapped for a role, or did not acknowledge that he has been tapped for a role, but he did say that if he were nominated, he would love to take that role on.
Hey, Brian, did you send John Williams a case of White Claw? Because that speech yesterday was a pretty big debacle.
Right. Yeah, so yesterday, to back up, he made a speech here in New York City where Williams said that he could actually see the case for preemptively cutting rates in the event that rates are too close to the zero bound, which they are right now, 2.25 to 2.5%. But he was talking about that generally, kind of speaking about the idea that in previous episodes, we've seen issues where central banks get backed up against a wall. They have no other tools to use, so they need to cut rates fast. Markets saw that as an interpretation that he was actually interested in aggressively cutting rates in the July meeting, which took Fed funds futures contracts up on the odds of a 50 basis point cut as opposed to a 25 basis point cut. But shortly after, and this is relatively unprecedented, it doesn't happen very often, but the New York Fed actually sent a clarification to the media saying that he was talking about the general academic research on this type of topic about getting close to the zero bound. He was not talking about what the next policy move would be in July, so trying to walk some of that back. And when that did happen, we saw the odds of a 50 basis point cut come back down. So a little bit of misspeaking there, but interesting to see New York Fed try to clean that up after the fact.
Brian Chung, see you next week.